is when you hurt someone. Luke hurt the poor members of a particular shul because they're so weak that the presence of someone who doesn't sign on to everything they do rattles their sense of who they are, and they just can't tolerate it. Okay, he hurt them because they're weak and they're easily hurt. Does that? But the transgression then is their problem for being so fragile, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's
Well, that could be too, yeah.
And same with the guy who makes you feel like a jerk because you bring some goddamn sprinkles into his house. If the guy has testicles, then he knows what his convictions are. Okay, this is a particular person who came in. She didn't know all my crazy ass nuances of how I do my shit. And then he handles it in a way that respects you. But he didn't do that. He couldn't do that. He was too much of a puss.
Right.
So yes, it was transgressive because you're dealing with someone who's easily transgressed.
Well, let's say she brought those sprinkles in and she treifed up $500 worth of his utensils. Like if Monica ran into your car and did $500 damage to your car, you'd get upset. So if Monica drops her cupcakes, puts them down, and bits of them sprinkle under $500 worth of.
Well, it's his fault. If it was important to him not to have someone bring sprinkles into his home, then he needed to say,
He shouldn't have been dating.
Yeah, he put himself in a situation.
He shouldn't have been dating a sex addict.
Well, no, he was right to be dating her, but he wasn't up to it. Like he said, what he should have done is sat you down and said, look, I'm very easily wounded, and part of my baggage is that when someone brings sprinkles into my home, it really causes problems for me. And that may be true. It may be that these are the particular rules I abide by, and so you really need not to bring sprinkles to my house. But if this was a really, like, holy shit woman, I don't do sprinkles, that's not my thing, then he really needed to make that clear in advance. And if he just, had other stuff on his plate and it didn't occur to him and just thought other people were going to know his needs without his expressing them, that's his problem. That guy out there,
But shouldn't have Monica, if she was in a relationship with someone she cares about, shouldn't she?
I didn't care about him.
Research the laws of kosher.
Well, did he tell her that no.
Wait, you can't eat them off a paper plate out of the paper box in the living room?
Do sprinkles?
My
Do
understanding
sprinkles
is that
have
you
a
could.
hashkafa on them? Do they have like an OU? If they're not, they're treif. It's like bringing pork.
So I thought
in the
I just
house?
couldn't come into the kitchen. Like I can't sit
He
it
doesn't
on
want
the
stuff
kosher
that's
counter.
not kosher in his house.
Yeah, but we don't know what he wants. He has to tell. He has to. He has to tell her.
That's not
But she has
standard
to be-
across the board.
If you keep kosher, depending on what level of kosher you keep. So he's keeping it fairly strictly. It seems like, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay, and then he's dating. Okay, sorry.
But he'll eat the cupcakes on the doorstep.
Yeah, he's a moron. I'm sorry.
You see?
Yes.
That's my problem.
Why is he's got standards?
No, that's fine to have standards, Luke. But he puts her in the situation. He puts Monica in the situation of, okay, I'm going to date a woman who doesn't come from my background, so isn't going to intuitively know all my random arbitrary stuff. Now, it's fine that he's got that random arbitrary stuff, but then he needs to, if he's concerned that something she's going to do is going to be a big problem for him, he doesn't know that she's not going to know automatically. She doesn't know what to look at or what to figure out. He needs to communicate that to her.
I think he communicated it.
No, yeah, retrospectively, by being a sissy.
But see, there's a way to do it. It's, there's a way to do it with kindness and compassion and understanding. And that's the problem.
Well, because there's no reason not to be compassionate. It was his fault in the first place for creating a dynamic in which that was a very foreseeable outcome, and then flipping out like a bitch over it. So no, I'm serious. It bothers me because I think we're talking about the same thing here. Fine. They say to you, okay, you transgressed our little house rules, and
Guest 31 says Monica takes his breath away.
Yeah. I will
not be able to concentrate on my Torah study.
I said that. She was like, oh, well, I don't know if I should sit in the seat closest to the camera. I was like, yeah, whatever.
Oh, that's funny.
He even left the chat room. He couldn't breathe.
Okay, well, attend to yourself and then come back. Well, he's got to do what he's got to do also. What?
Lord, I hope my students aren't watching.
She's got a student. She's got her...
Well, you didn't do anything.
She incited sin in this man.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
Nice.
So, chapter 29, verse 28. I have a thought.
Yeah.
And it says the hidden sins in this translation are for Hashem, our God, but the revealed sins are for us and our children forever to carry out all the words of this Torah. I think that's so profound, and it is so Jewish. Like if I sat here on Shabbat and watched TV, no one in my shul would give me a hard time. Because,
right.
I mean, first of all, they wouldn't know. But even if they did know, I mean, once they know, then it became public. But
right.
there's a huge distinction in Judaism between private sins and
right.
public sins.
Right.
If I walk down the street listening to my Sony Walkman on Shabbat,
right.
I'm extending a middle finger to Shabbat publicly. But if I sit in my hovel and listen to my Sony Walkman, no one's going to give me a hard time on Shabbat.
Right.
So I think this is so profound. Now, like the Gentiles, I'm going to say this. They, you know, they often think, oh, it's hypocrisy.
Right.
You know, if someone says, you know, advocates marital fidelity and then privately they commit adultery,
right.
maybe it's not hypocrisy. Maybe they're just weak. Like we're all weak.
Right.
And so I think it's very profound teaching. Private sins, that's between you and God. Public sins, such as what I do on my blog. My blog is public. So therefore, you know, I get taken to the cleaners if I do something bad on my blog because it's public. But if I just say the same thing privately, it's not a big deal. I think it's really profound.
Yeah, that's a very, to me, that's a very interesting interpretation because it's also, I find it very plausible. It makes sense. My reaction to that verse was very different. But
what was your reaction?
I won't argue with what you said. Well, to me, maybe, look, I've always felt like growing up in Southern California in a Jewish community, somehow I ended up kind of Protestant. And the whole thing with Jesus and the Pharisees,
that always
well, that's what hits me when I read this. Well, I mean, it's not even like well, I don't know if it, maybe it does strike a chord, but it certainly it's what I thought about when I read this. Like, yes, this is what Jesus was talking
on the outside,
about.
But on the inside, you watch TV on Shabbos.
Right, and Jesus' example was the Pharisees, and we are the spiritual heirs to the Pharisaic Judaism. Is that, you know, yeah, okay, that's great. I see how, you know, how holy you look and all the, how vigorously you're shaking back and forth or doing however they did it then. But I know that at home you don't do that, and you're doing that for us in public. And, yeah.
And does that bother you?
Well, I don't know whether it bothers me, because I'm open to the kind of idea you were putting forth, that this is a kind of a community management thing, that like if you're going to fuck up, at least don't do it where it's going to persuade other people to. But I do feel like, yes, that's something that I see in Judaism, this kind of public-private dichotomy that I don't see in all other traditions. Some you do. Some communities that have lived as minorities develop this. They pretend
it's more
to be.
about action than it is about intent, which is different in Christianity.
Right.
Christianity is more about, well, what was in your heart?
But the action, the rightness of the action varies greatly depending on who is looking at you.
Well, it's totally the context.
Right.
Right. But it's not even
profound.
It is, but it's the context. But the context specifically is who is watching. What gaze are you subject to at that moment? It's not. It's who's looking at you, and what will they be thinking? And I'm like, I don't know. To me, it's not. Somehow, it's not.
It's not what?
Impressive.
I think it's profound. But what do you think?
It's interesting. I tend to agree with Joey, but what you said is interesting too, and I think there's something to that. And I hadn't thought about it in that way. I don't know. I mean, I do think though that maybe there's a line. Like it can be about this sense of community management or whatever you called it, but I think there's a point at which, in some instances, it becomes more. It's a holier than thou type of thing. It becomes, I want to be seen as someone who's following all the rules in order to set myself aside from those people who aren't.
Is that bad?
It's exclusionary.
Is that bad?
It can be. I think it can be.
You don't like that attitude, though. I can tell you don't like
I like humility and piousness.
You don't like exclusivity. It rubs you the wrong way.
I don't like when people act like they're better than other people because they've chosen a particular way to worship or read or behave or whatever.
That's one of the reasons people hate Jews, because we inherently believe that we are better.
Christians believe Jews are better though too. I mean, that's like built into Christianity. The Jews are the chosen people.
But wait, that is another.
Do you think we're better?
Jews? No.
You don't think we're better than the non-Jews? And I think we're smarter, better educated, more charitable with one another, create better communities, and more learning.